So, Dad, I'm here to ask you a couple questions about art and design, if that's alright with you. My first question is, what do you think of when you think of design?
Well, I'm happy to try to answer those questions. I can only answer them from the context of my experience and values. They may not be somebody else's, but I think they hold up pretty well. What do I think of when I think of design? Well, design is in a broad way is the arrangement of constructive elements in space and time, usually for a purpose that is at least somewhat well defined. That's it. Quite simple.
Okay, then what does design mean to your art?
Okay, that's a fair question. Well, for my art, space is usually a two-dimensional surface. In other words, a piece of paper or a canvas. And, for the designer, as all artists are designers, freedom is always limited. And it might be limited by the boundaries of the surface we're working on, but also by the tools and the materials that we're using to construct the elements of the design. We never have total freedom. Not even in the general conception of the image we want to create. There are always constraints. In my case, there are constraints of values, in other words, my aesthetic sense, but also in the conception itself. It often has boundaries that dictate what is sensible and what isn't.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, what is your idea development process?
Okay. Well, first let me just say, when I hear the word process, I usually go for my pistol. I don't like the word very much. It's one of those buzzwords today, and it's lost its meaning. First, I'm a figurative artist, and often my subjects are developed out of some literary theme. Currently, for example, I'm working from old Greek mythologies. I like them because they are transcendent, which is to say they have a psychological element that I can work with and then eventually translate into something of my own. The artist's job, no matter what sort of art one makes, is to give form to that which has no essential form of its own. Now you might say, well, my figures that I use, human forms and so on, chairs, have forms. What am I doing? Well, that's true enough. A figure has a sensible form. It's a human figure. It's very clear what that is. A chair has a form. We know it's a chair. But that's not my subject in my paintings. My subject is the psychology that has no essential form of its own, and you can only establish it by the arrangements of those formal elements that somehow, through that arrangement and their relationship to one another, that psychology finds its form. It's never very clear when I begin, but as I begin and I make decisions, that in itself limits the next decision I can make. I've already made one commitment, and in making that commitment, I dictate the set of choices I have for the next set of decisions. And eventually, I run out of options, and that's when you say, well, the damn thing's done. That's the best I can explain it.
So, what, in your opinion, makes something art?
Well, this question gets me into trouble a lot because what I think is art, a lot of people today, well, they have a different idea about it. But I think my idea about it is the correct one, and they can go do what they want with their idea. Something becomes art when it transcends the ordinary. It invariably has evidence of intelligence and imagination. And it speaks to us in a particular language that does not tire us. It provokes in us an aesthetic and psychological response that satisfies over and over again. In short, it's compelling. And if it isn't any of those things, then why would anyone want to waste their time with it? The 10th century Chinese painter Ma Yuan. Now, how often over my 71-year lifetime have I seen the drawings and paintings of that 10th century Chinese painter? And again, I'm in awe of them. And I never tire of looking at them. Well, that's because they're art. That's real art. Because it speaks to me across the centuries, in another space, in another culture, but it talks to me and I love it and I keep looking at it and I want to do it and over again. That's art. It's like a hoot. Does somebody get tired of Bach? You know, that's art. It's like good theater. You're a theater person. Good theater. I don't know how many times you see Hamlet. If it's done well, it's Hamlet and it's beautiful and it's gorgeous and all of those things. And or Drei Groschen Oper. Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht. I love those guys and I've seen those things 100 times and I never tire of them. That's art. I've seen paintings by Monet and Picasso and 1,000 other artists, you know, and each time I see them, I enjoy them, and that's art. My goal is to try to make something that maybe does that. I've got paintings that I did 30 and 40 years ago that I still love. So they're still speaking to me. I don't know if they speak to anybody else, but they still speak to me. And that's art. Okay?
So, Dad, if you don't mind me asking, I was wondering if you could show some design elements in, you know, a painting that you've started or have already finished.
Sure. No problem.
Great.
Now, I have to say, I don't generally let people look at something I've just started, but for your purposes, I will. You are, after all, my daughter, and I can do this. It's against my principles, however. But this is a new painting I've started. It was an idea that was suggested to me by a friend, and she wanted me to do something around the idea of the Greek myth Psyche and Eros. I resisted this for quite a while because the story of Psyche and Eros is really the story that we've come to know is actually Roman and not Greek, and I don't like Romans. They take perfectly good Greek
stories and messed them up. They changed the name of Eros to Cupid anyway, which is kind of stupid. But I decided after a while that maybe this wasn't such a bad idea and I could do something with it. So I made some sketches. Now I'm not going to do the kind of treatment of this. I thought within that story there's something important, some psychological element that I can exploit for tackling human relationships. And so I came up with this idea of Psyche and Eros in their middle age. As the story goes, they ended up getting married. He was a god, she wasn't. But after he got married, he prevailed upon Zeus to make her immortal, and so they could grow old together, as gods grow old, if they grow old at all. But I've got them in middle age, and what they're doing is trying to at least search out and find their lost youth. That's what we all do at middle age anyway. So I did a drawing, and then I translated that drawing to the canvas, and since it's gotten to the canvas, I've also modified it, because when it's exploded up larger, it has a new design dynamic. But these are my boundaries, the edges of this painting, and that's the first limit upon the freedom I have to develop this idea. So I have to make my idea work within this limited space. And what you do is try to construct these things with a placement that first does not upset the eye, and secondly, it allows you to construct things in a way that guides the eye, because the subject is not the individual pieces, but their relationship in space. So one of the things you do as a designer then is recognizing these boundaries. They become part of your design. The boundaries are part of the design, and when you create something, you put a figure in the middle, you immediately set up a tension between this edge and the figure. It's like stretching rubber bands. You're creating visual tensions. And I also have tension, the distance I allow here between the top of the head of this figure and the top of this creates a tension. Then there's the relationship to this figure. How close does this figure want to be? I want to reveal enough of this figure that we understand she's middle-aged. I want this figure to be somewhat in the foreground and somewhat detached, because romantic love, when people first fall in love, romantic love is the most superficial kind. Romantic love lasts for about 10 minutes. Once you're married and you've been with each other for a long time, it's a new kind of thing. It's not romantic love anymore. It's friendship, it's tolerance. To some extent, even sometimes you're a little bored. And so I wanted to try to set up that kind of conceptual tension between the two figures. Okay, let me back up a little bit. As I said, I've got these figures and I've arranged them in a particular way within the boundaries of this canvas. And I must say, if this were a neoclassical painting of this subject, and they painted, neoclassical guys liked this subject very much, Eros and Psyche, they would have taken these two people and put them in the center of the painting. There would have been Psyche reclining on a bed, head to foot. You would see her, the bed would be very formal, it would be centered in the painting, and Eros would be sort of behind, and you'd see him head to foot. It would be a much more formal arrangement. In this, what I've decided to do, first I put them in a bathroom, and a neoclassical painter would not put them in a bathroom, because the bathroom implies a kind of intimacy. and I want to have that feeling of intimacy, but at the same time, I want it to also be somewhat candid. So I have it framed so that, even part of the arm of Eros is chopped off here, and the part of the little dog over here is chopped off. The dog is asleep on a stool, and this implies that this is a routine, something that the dog is used to being there and is relaxed enough to be asleep. Everyone here is in this shot is now in this tension of relationship between forms and edges, and we have intimacy that now in this context is devoid of romanticism, because they're doing ordinary things that everyone does, and it's also devoid of any sexuality. They are familiar enough with each other that they can be semi-nude and somewhat bored. And this guy's looking off to the side. He's pulling up a towel. He's probably come out of the bath. She's looking in the mirror, trying to find that piece of youth that's somehow gone somewhere and she can't find it. And all that remains for me to decide here is my palette, my color palette. And that I haven't decided on yet. I have choices I can make. I'm considering, shall this be essentially light and white and have the kind of sanitary feeling of a bathroom, or am I going to make it dark? One possibility is I might make this a black and white painting with just these little figures emerging out of the darkness. I haven't figured it out yet. I have to decide on a palette. Am I going to use, how will I use reds? How will I use yellows? I don't know yet. Each color has a psychological component, and so the choices I make with those colors are going to be crucial to this thing either working or not working. It might end up a total failure. But right now it's kind of working. I like the way it's going. The elements are in the right place. I've established the right psychology between the forms. But where I go next, I won't know until I drink a lot more coffee and look at it a lot more. And then I'll probably figure out what my color palette's going to be. But that's it. That's how you work. And I might change my mind at any point through this and take it into a whole new direction. I don't know yet. But right now, it's going in this one direction, and so far it satisfies me. When I start working in with the color and line, because it's color and line and textures, they're all part of the constructive elements that go to make this thing come together. How's that? Does that work for you? Okay.
Well, thank you, Dad. Mwah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.